Welcome to Heat Checks and Hail Marys. This is Mike Kegley. Last week, we talked about how dangerous an upset loss would be, particularly to the two-loss SEC teams. And this week, we saw a stark difference between the SEC teams that are vying for a college football playoff contender status and their Big Ten counterparts. While number 7 Alabama lost to a 6-5 Oklahoma team, number 9 Ole Miss lost to a 6-5 Florida team, and number 15 Texas A&M lost to a 5-6 Auburn team in overtime. Number 4 Penn State beat 6-5 Minnesota, and number 12 Boise State beat a 2-9 Wyoming team. So, what's the key lesson there? If you want to play in the CFP, you need to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Don't lose to average teams, beat them, even if it's only by a point. So we take a look at some of the upsets in the top 25 yesterday. Now, it wasn't really an upset, but number 5 Indiana lost to number 2 Ohio State. Number 7 Alabama lost to Oklahoma. Number 9 Ole Miss lost to Florida. Number 14 BYU lost to number 21 Arizona State. Number 15 Texas A&M lost to Auburn. Number 16 Colorado lost to Kansas. Number 19 Army lost to number 6 Notre Dame. Again, another one that's not really an upset. As I stated last week, the expansion to 12 teams has been a rousing success. I have wanted an 8 or a 16 team tournament forever. And I can live with 12 because it's right in between. But this has been a rousing success as we see so many teams are playing key games late in the month of November. This keeps college football fans on the edge of their seat, and fans of individual teams, they've got a reason to tune in every week besides just their fandom, because if it was a 4-team playoff, they would have already been eliminated. Or if it was just like the ancient days of my youth, it would just be teams playing for the title of their conference and then for whoever they play in the bowls. This level of focus on teams and opportunities really reminds me more of the NFL than any other sport, and certainly much better than the old days of college football. But as we look, we see a whole bunch of games this weekend coming up November 30th. There's some games that have attracted my attention. Now, probably not as many as there could be, but schedule makers have to anticipate the movers and shakers are going to be. Nobody thought Indiana would be in a key game in the last week of the season. And of course, there is rivalry week, which limits what can be done. Now, I would be willing to move rivalry week up a week. I can see fans of tradition already getting upset, but there still are quite a few, though. Number 3 Texas is at number 20, Texas A&M. You have Michigan and Ohio State, and Michigan could be the spoiler and make things just horrible for Ryan Day. Number 7 Tennessee is at Vanderbilt, hoping that they can escape what happened to Alabama. Number 16 South Carolina is at number 12 Clemson. That should be a rousing game. Number 5 Notre Dame is at USC, and USC has an opportunity to knock Notre Dame out of the CFP. Notre Dame has responded well since the NIU loss, and they can't afford a second. Auburn plays number 13, Alabama. Number 8, Miami is playing at Syracuse. And Kansas State is at number 17, Iowa State. So there are a lot of big matchups this weekend. There's a lot of fun for college football fans. And I think the key thing is with a 12-team playoff, there are a lot of storylines that are still alive going into not only the championship games, but who gets selected after the championship games. So this has been a huge success for college football, and I only expect it to get bigger as the years go by. Let's take a look at Hail Mary number 1. How long will the SEC and Big Ten play nice with CFP invites on the line? This is the third week we've talked about this. So, unfortunately, it's an evolving story, and we like to keep up on it. I am still of a mind that the way this year's results are breaking, the Big Ten and the SEC will dodge a bullet when it comes to the relationship between these two conferences. What I mean by this is I don't think the shots will be flying in both directions. The SEC now only has three teams with either one or two losses, while the Big Ten has four teams with zero or one loss. The phenomenon of the SEC eating their own may actually allow the ACC to sneak a second team into the CFP. While the SEC is clearly dissatisfied with Indiana's strength of schedule, the question remains as to why a team with three losses, at least with one or two being bad losses, should be placed ahead of a team with their only loss being to the number two team in the country. It's hard for me to see Indiana being left out, assuming they beat Purdue. But the other hope that the SEC has is to steal a bid. Now, ironically, this other hope lies squarely at the feet of Big Ten Conference member USC. Notre Dame being upset is a way for the SEC to find another bid to compete for with one of their three loss teams. If Notre Dame stays on course and defeats USC, this could mean the SEC only lands its one or two lost teams. As it stands now, the Big Ten can claim four CFP spots. But if the SEC has three one or two lost teams, you can expect a lot of SEC heat via ESPN pushing for one or more of its three lost teams. The targets of this heat will be an 11-1 Indiana team, assuming that Purdue doesn't pull off the biggest upset since maybe Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson all those years ago. Either way, this is shaping up to be an unbelievable weekend. And the SEC, the teams that are favorites, if you want to be in the CFP, you got to win the big game. And certainly that is what did not happen last week in multiple venues. Let's take a look at Hail Mary number 2, the hot takes. Hot take number 1, Michigan's alleged $10 million snaring of quarterback Bryce Underwood has had one unintended result, and it's a very good one for Wisconsin. The largely QB-less Badgers have received the commitment of one of the nation's top uncommitted 2025 quarterbacks, Carter Smith. Now, Smith dropped his commitment to Michigan because of Michigan's pursuit of Bryce Underwood. In this case, Michigan gets their guy, and Wisconsin does too. Luke Fickell has been looking for a quarterback to run his offense. Maybe he's finally found him. Hot take number 2. Indiana fans looking for respect on the gridiron should at least wait until the regular season is over before crying about said lack of respect. It's been 57 years since the team has won a Big Ten football championship. Now, no coach has done better than Cignetti has this season. To go from the expectations of being either 17th or 18th in the Big Ten to camping out in the top 5 and top 10 during the season is nothing short of amazing. No one is taking anything away from it. Hoosier fans should enjoy the season and then worry about the long term. And if you want respect for the program, do that after the season's over. A new season, new players, and a new schedule will provide new opportunities and challenges. So live in the moment with this once in a lifetime season. It's going to be over before you know it. And as the fan of a team like Illinois, we know how rare these moments can come along. Don't be thinking about tomorrow and waste a very cool today. Hot take number 3. I saw pictures of Tyson Fury training for his rematch with Alexander Usyk. At this point, Tyson looks to be in better shape than last time. I don't know how many of these photos were retouched or what they did to make him look good. I have no idea. But if he's legitimately in better shape, it could be an even closer fight than the last fight. As a boxing fan, I want to be entertained, and both fighters taking training seriously is a huge component of that. So, a tip of my hat to Mr. Fury. Keep working hard, and I look forward to one heck of a bout when he fights Usyk again. Hot take number 4. Did we watch the birth of a new SEC rivalry between Oklahoma and Alabama? Now, both are legitimately two of the true blue bloods of college football. And despite Oklahoma having a rare and ill timed, challenging season, they were able to put Alabama's CFP hopes at least on life support for the time being. This game went from highly anticipated in the preseason to during the season. But I guarantee you one thing, after what happened this weekend, their next meeting will be circled by Alabama coaches, players, and fans. Yet another great rivalry in the SEC is fantastic to start up and should be a ton of fun for fans of both teams and for casual observers like myself. Hot take number 5. How the heck did the hit on Shedeur Sanders not result in a penalty? The lack of a flag was nothing short of amazing to me. That was easily a late hit. Even worse, though, it was a hit that was aiming at the knees of a talented player. And that's about as dirty as you're going to see in the game of football. Sanders could have been seriously injured, and to do it on a play like that was nothing short of cowardice. I would have loved to have seen a 15-yard penalty going, and I hope whoever that player was thinks long and hard the next time he loses his temper or wants to throw a cheap shot, because you might actually hurt somebody, or you might set yourself up to be hurt by that player's teammates. Hot take number 6. As people know, I'm big into movies, big into sci-fi, big into entertainment that takes me away from today's world and puts me into a place that I'm experiencing nothing from the modern era. If you go to see Gladiator II, it is a fun movie, and especially if you enjoyed the original Gladiator, this movie has one thing that it takes from Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. What this movie does is it plays with historical facts, but it still is hugely entertaining. Now, if you want an accurate study on the history of Rome, go to somewhere other than the movies. But they incorporated enough emperors in this to make it entertaining, and maybe it'll pique the curiosity of a person or two to do some additional study. Now, I found the storyline a little bit rushed, but I assume, like many other sports, maybe being a gladiator has a component of just natural talent, because Paul Mescal, who was very entertaining as Lucius, really picked up the art of being a gladiator, and he did it much quicker than what we saw Russell Crowe do it in the first movie. And I thought they at least did enough of showing him getting better that we could buy into the fact that some time passed and he had to hone his skills. It didn't have quite that type of timeline in this story, but again, Mescal was believable, going from a fighter in the army to then being a gladiator. And of course, very similar to the last movie, you have a new, incredibly talented, but wrongly enslaved gladiator. So you know what direction things are going to go. Now, I will say, Denzel Washington chewed up the scenery playing the master manipulator who literally his job is to outthink everybody around him. He did a wonderful job of that. And having Connie Nielsen recreate the role of Lucilla was fantastic. Overall, it probably wasn't as violent nor as intense as the original, but it was probably a 3.5 out of 4. It was a fun movie, entertaining. You didn't think about what was going on. You didn't look at your watch. You had a couple hours of good, clean entertainment. And that's all you can ask for in my book when you go to the movies. Hail Mary number 3. After week 13, the Big Ten has 12 teams that are either bowling or in the CFP. That's a heck of a year. If Wisconsin beats Minnesota and Michigan State beats Rutgers, the Big Ten will have 14 of its 18 teams eligible for postseason play. If you want to compare that, the SEC will have 14 of its 16 teams eligible for the postseason if Auburn can pull the upset over Alabama. But let's take a look at the tiers now, and let's get a little bit more specific. Tier 1 is clearly Oregon and Ohio State. Only a single point divides these two juggernauts. On top of that, they appear to be on a collision course for their round 2 in the Big Ten Conference Championship game. Now, we know Michigan wants to spoil that, but if Ohio State plays up to their capabilities, we should see a classic battle for the Big Ten title in a few weeks. Sign me up for that. That looks like an exciting, exciting moment. And could it be that it's only the second of 3 meetings for these two teams this year? Shades of the NFL, but that's what it could be. And there isn't much separating these two. In Tier 2, Penn State and Indiana, depending on the desperation of the SEC, both teams, and certainly Indiana, will face attacks for their lack of strength of schedule. The players have nothing to do with the schedule. But if the SEC is forced to push a 3-loss team or two for CFP invites, I think they will go after Indiana's strength of schedule. And thus, neither team can afford an upset this weekend. Now, playing Maryland and Purdue, you really don't see that happening. But if it would happen, it would probably knock either team out of the CFP. So beware the upset. Tier 3, I've got that down to Illinois and Iowa. Illinois can achieve its first 9-win season since 2007 with a win over Northwestern this week. With its only loss to Oregon, Penn State, and a Minnesota team that will be bowling, the Illini actually have an argument if 3-loss teams are granted CFP bids because they have their share of victories over top 25 opponents as well. Iowa, of course, has a chance to win 8 games with a win versus Nebraska. That would mean the Hawkeyes have won 8 games every season since 2014, with the exception of the 2020 COVID season. That's typical performance for Kurt Ferentz out there. Just keep things going. Iowa keeps going to bowls. They keep making games ugly, and they keep winning. Tier 4, I have Michigan, Minnesota, USC, Nebraska, and Washington. All of these teams are bowl eligible, and all these teams are inconsistent. From week to week, the tier 3, 4, and 5 of the Big Ten, those teams are as unpredictable as trying to bet on NFL teams. Parity has hit college football, and these teams probably won't pull away from one another too much over the last game of the season. We'll also get to see the results in the bowl to see how they do. Tier 5 is Rutgers, Michigan State, and Wisconsin. Now, I expected Michigan State to be in Tier 6, so good job by new head coach Jonathan Smith. On one hand, Rutgers had a very easy schedule. On the other hand, they've been devastated by injuries to the point where they could have been on an episode of MASH. So overall, it's been a disappointing year for this team. Wisconsin's Luke Fickell, he's too expensive to be fired because with current NIL needs, no athletic director can walk around and ask somebody to pay a huge buyout for a coach. So he's fired his offensive coordinator, Phil Longo. We don't know how that's going to work. We'll see how that comes next season. But I think that's what you're going to see more of in this offseason. We may see one of the lowest total coaches fired years in a long time. So all the coaches who were complaining about we can't have NIL, we can't have NIL. Well, guess what? The reason why you still have a job after underperforming is because of NIL. So maybe instead of the reflexive change is bad, maybe people need to think about things and some of the ramifications and give it time before they freak out. And now in tier 6, Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, and UCLA. Now, in fairness, Purdue is probably at the bottom. I could put in a tier 7, but why embarrass anybody? Maryland has certainly underachieved from a team that people had predicted to be a 7-win team. Northwestern has a talent gap following Pat Fitzgerald's resignation amid scandal. It's going to take some time to get that taken care of. And UCLA was up and down during Deshaun Foster's first season. So with one weekend left in 2024, at least with the regular season, the Big Ten has 4 of the top 10 teams and 5 of the top 25 teams, including number 1 and number 2. The SEC has 3 of the top 10 teams and 8 top 25 teams. Clearly, at this point in time, the Big Ten looks heavier at the top and the SEC looks deeper throughout the conference. We have another week, then we have the CFP coming on the heels of conference championships. We should, by the end of the year, get to see which conference is going to get bragging rights. Will the Big Ten win their second national title in a row? Or will the SEC stop the streak? Or do we see a dark horse candidate come out from nowhere and get a chance to win? Well, that's all in the future. And the way it's set up right now, I'll be tuned in to watch all of them. Until next time, keep moving forward.